I remember exactly when it hit me for real. It wasn't my first shift, or even my second. At the beginning, everything feels like routine. Meds on time, clean sheets, assisted baths, meals, charting. You walk in thinking you understand the job, that it's just care, just being present. That there's a moment, one very specific moment, when you realize there's something no one ever warned you about. It was late afternoon. Slightly yellow, making everything feel quieter than it already is. Visiting hours. A few minutes earlier, the place felt different. Fuller, louder. Perfume in the air. Forced laughter. I had heard those words so many times they barely registered anymore. But that day I noticed. I was standing near the doorway of one of the rooms when I saw an elderly woman being left behind. Her daughter adjusted the pillow, gave her a quick kiss on the forehead, something about being late, and walked out while looking at her phone. It was all very quick, very normal, no tears, no scene, just another visit ending. But what stayed with me was what came after. The door was left slightly open. I was still there when the silence started to settle. Not just the absence of noise. It feels like the whole place starts breathing slower. Like everything slows down together. I looked at her. Woman. And her eyes were still fixed on the door. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was waiting. Even though she knew it was already over. A few seconds passed. Maybe a minute. Just sat there. Her hand still slightly raised, like she had paused in the middle of a gesture that never got to finish. That's when it clicked. It wasn't about illness. It wasn't about age. It wasn't about physical care. It was about what's left when everyone walks away. Down that same hallway, in other rooms, the same scene played out in different versions. A man adjusting his shirt like someone was still watching him. Another, trying to catch footsteps that weren't there anymore. A TV left on with no one really paying attention. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, but heavy, in a way you can't really explain unless you've stayed behind after the door closes. And the strangest part is, they see their loved one clean, fed, put together. They ask if everything's okay, and almost always hear, "I'm fine." Because in that short moment, they're also protecting the person who came. They don't want to feel like a burden. They don't want to ruin the visit, but I stay. See the before, and especially the after. And it was that day, standing in that hallway, watching that half-open door, and that unmoving gaze, that I realized something that never left me. No one is truly prepared to understand what happens inside a place like this. Because to understand it, you have to be there after everyone else is gone. There's a very specific moment in this place, one that people on the outside almost never get to see. It's not written in charts, it doesn't show up in photos, and families don't really talk about it. There's this strange in-between. A few lingering minutes. The rooms still hold on to the sound of voices. You can still smell perfume in the air. Some doors stay open, like someone might still be inside. It almost feels like the place is trying to hold on to the little bit of life that just passed through. But then, it starts. I see it every single day. Some patients keep their eyes on the door. Others reach for their phones, even when their eyesight is failing, just to check if maybe a message came in. Some fix their hair again. The ones that worry me the most. They go quiet. Stale. Staring at a fixed point that isn't really anything. Like something inside them shut off the moment the visit ended. I remember one man in particular. His son came every Sunday. Always on time. Stayed about 40 minutes. Talked mostly about work. Not much else. But he showed up. And for that, man, that was everything. One day, I paid closer attention. The visit ended like it always did. A hand on the shoulder, a quick "I'll be back next week," and he was gone. I was in the hallway when I heard the chair scrape lightly. I looked inside and saw the man trying to stand up on his own. Slowly. Struggling. It wasn't time for the bathroom. It wasn't mealtime. He just wanted to get to the door. It took him a while, but he made it. Stood there, holding onto the frame, looking out into the empty hallway. No one there. Not even the sound of footsteps. He stayed like that for a few seconds, then turned back. But he wasn't the same. He sat in the same chair, same position, but his body looked heavier. His gaze lower, like those 40 minutes had been enough to remind him of everything that was no longer part of his life. And this happens all the time. It's not obvious neglect. It's not a lack of basic care. It's something quieter, harder to point at. It's the difference between being visited and being truly remembered. Because in here, the visit ends, but the waiting doesn't. What's left is that empty space between one visit and the next. Time that stretches too long, a silence that nothing really fills. Some patients start counting days. Others ask over and over in the same afternoon when someone's coming back. But I see the way they look whenever they hear footsteps in the hallway. And it's in that after, that invisible part of the day, that I begin to understand who is really alone, not by how many visits they get, but by what happens when those visits are over. At first, I tried to tell myself that what I was seeing were exceptions, that the silence after visits, the stillness, the waiting that didn't seem to end, belonged to specific cases, more sensitive people, harder life stories, families that were a little more distant than usual. But when you're here every single day, that explanation doesn't hold up for long, because it starts repeating itself, first in one room, then in two, before you know it. It's the whole hallway. I began noticing patterns, small things that, on their own, don't seem like much, but together become impossible to ignore. There's the woman who asks 3 times in the same shift, but because somewhere deep down, there's still hope the answer might change. There's the man who insists on being ready hours before visiting time. Clothes picked out, hair carefully, combed, sitting there waiting, sometimes for hours. And when no one shows up, he brushes it off, says he was tired, says he didn't even feel like having visitors anyway. But I saw him. I see all of it. And then there are the ones who stop asking. That's the quietest moment of all. Because in the beginning they ask. They want to know when someone's coming, if anyone called, if there's any news. There's still a connection to the outside world. But over time, that changes. They ask less. They expect less. Until one day, it's not acceptance. It's resignation. I remember one woman who used to say her family's names out loud. Her son, her granddaughter, her sister, to keep them alive inside her. Every day, at some point, she would bring them up. Months later, she stopped. Not because she forgot, but because no one came anymore. And silence took the place of their names. That's when you realize this isn't about isolated cases. It's a human pattern that unfolds quietly. Families that start off present and then slowly space things out. Weekly visits turn into monthly ones, then just special occasions. And eventually, almost nothing. And the people here feel every gap growing wider. You don't have to say it. Their bodies show it. Their eyes give it away. Time weighs differently on someone who's waiting. And the hardest part to accept is that, most of the time, There isn't a clear moment you can point to and say, this is when they were abandoned. It's not one big act. It's small absences adding up. Small delays. Small, not today. Until one day when someone finally notices. It's already been too long. And in here, time doesn't move fast. It stretches. It lingers. And it demands to be felt. That's why I stopped seeing these moments as isolated, happening in different rooms with different names, but leading to the same silent ending. After a while working in a place like this, the one people are comfortable talking about, but that's not what weighs the most. Day after day, what really weighs on you is everything that comes before it. It's the feeling of being slowly left behind. No patient looks at me and says, I'm afraid of being forgotten. The way they say, whenever you can, or if it's not too much trouble, it shows up in how they defend the people who don't come. My son works a lot. My granddaughter lives far away. Life is busy these days, is one of the hardest things to witness, because deep down, it's not about understanding. It's about holding on to whatever connection still feels real. I've seen people minimize their own pain just to keep the idea that they're still remembered. I've seen patients smile through a visit, and minutes later ask me if I think that person will actually come back. Not with anger, but with a kind of doubt that cuts deeper. And that's when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Someone's life. It's becoming distant while you're still physically here. It's being remembered out of obligation, instead of love. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually. In the gaps. I've seen patients who once had big families, children, grandchildren, full lives outside. They ended up alone in a room, not because they stopped mattering overnight, but because life outside kept moving, and they were slowly left behind. And the hardest part is, they know, even when they don't say it, even when they try to hide it. They notice when they stop being a priority. They notice when visits are squeezed between other commitments, when time gets shorter, when the look in someone's eyes changes. And that creates a quiet kind of pain that changes everything. The way they speak, the way they wait, the way they exist in that space. And that's why I say, long before the end arrives. After watching this happen over and over again, leave work and go back to being the same. But as quiet warnings, I've tried to ignore it before. But some things don't stay behind when your shift ends. They follow you. In the silence of the drive home, in the moment you pick up you start seeing things differently. You start noticing who you've been putting off, who you keep saying, I'll visit someday. I see how it turns into, it's been a while, then into, it's been too long. And by the time someone realizes it, sometimes there's no way to make it right the way they wish they could. This isn't about guilt. It's about time. About presence. About we choose to do with the people in our lives while there's still real time left. I don't walk out of here giving speeches. Something changed. I started calling more, showing up without a reason, staying a little longer when I feel like leaving, because I've seen the other side of it. I've seen what's left. Dramatic. It's quiet. And maybe that's what makes it so unsettling. There's no single moment where everything falls apart. It's small choices, repeated over time, creating a distance that's hard to undo. And in here, that distance has a face, a name, a daily routine. I look at these people every day. It's not the end of life that. Make up for it afterward. You don't repair it with late regret. You build it now. In ordinary days. In simple visits. In moments that seem small, but to someone who's waiting, mean everything. Because in the end, what hurts the most isn't leaving its having waited. And almost no one came.